Have you ever walked into a affiliate, looked at the workout of the day, specifically looked at the weight prescribed for that day and thought to yourself, yeah, I can do that for sure. And then you kind of start to get into the workout and then things just kind of go haywire. For no reason, you feel you can do the weight, but for some reason something's not clicking. Well, this video is for you specifically, and that goes for me as well, because I definitely fall into this category a lot of the time. Because most athletes, it's not the weight that's the problem. The problem is everything that comes with the weight, and we're going to kind of dig into it a little bit, right? So one of the biggest misconceptions in CrossFit is that RX is defined by weight or what skills that you know. We'll get to skills a little bit later, but I want to kind of zero in on just the weight for today, right? People look at the board and think, can I really lift that weight? And usually, 9 times out of 10, I usually get a yes. Because then if you don't say yes, obviously we have to scale back accordingly. But when I'm talking to the almost RX athlete, most of the time, yes, I can do the weight. And with that, they automatically assume that they're RX ready, right? Quote unquote RX ready. But RX doesn't mean it's a strength test, right? It doesn't mean that just because you can do the weight means you can do it in every single workout that appears up on that whiteboard. It's about repeatability, doing it under fatigue especially. You're not being asked to lift the weight just once, because we've all fallen into that trap. It's how can I move that weight efficiently over and over again. Once my heart rate starts to climb, my grip starts to get very, very tired, and my breathing's compromising, getting all kinds of crazy out of control. Can I still do it? That becomes a very different question. And this is something that I want to take the time to break down, because this is the part that most people miss, right? RX weight is on its own rarely the issue. It's about the inside of that workout and what issues kind of come with it, right? What's built around the workout, what's going to dictate how that weight actually feels when you're in the heat of the moment. Because now you're dealing with cycling the barbell over singles, right? We all have done fast singles before, but even still, that heart rate starts to jack up despite only doing 1 rep at a time, but in rapid fire succession. Breathing starts to become an issue while moving the load. Transitions under fatigue just starts to get longer and longer, right? We've all done the thing of like, oh, I'm going to take a couple extra seconds to chalk up, or take a couple extra deep breaths before I start something else, because I'm just tired and I'm just trying to get going. Grip, always a huge fatiguing factor. And then we start to make mental pacing decisions, right? We start to feel like, oh man, I'm really starting to get tired. So then in the process of thinking, I'm wasting time, precious seconds, just standing there thinking to myself in the middle of a workout when I really should be moving. And that's why almost RX athletes say things like, I can lift a weight, but I can't do it in the middle of a workout sometimes. And that sentence is a huge giveaway. Now, when it comes to being an intermediate level athlete, that almost RX athlete, your strength is usually progressed really fast, more than your movement economy, right? I always kind of use the analogy of you have a bank account. You can only make so many withdrawals, right? You've learned to lift heavier, but you haven't fully learned how to relax under load, breathe efficiently while you're cycling, and keep your technique intact even when you're tired. And I think that's a big one, right? You hear coaches say this all the time, and I don't think it really hits home until you're kind of in the heat in a moment. You realize, oh, maybe I'm pulling a little bit too much. I'm pulling early with that barbell with my arms instead of using my legs like I normally would for a normal lift, right? If I was doing for one, technique tends to be perfect 9 times out of 10. In the heat of the moment, when I ask you to do 10 reps, it becomes a little bit of a different thing. So movement fatigue starts to show up. Everything becomes more expensive, right? You start to take more withdrawals out of that bank account, right? It might have cost you $1 for the first rep, but then the second rep starts to become $1.10. Then it's $1.20. And so you start building on that fatigue level. It starts to compound on itself, and suddenly you're starting to take big withdrawals out of your bank account. And suddenly it feels like you're very, very out of place. You're very out of whack. And it's not that you're weak, it's just that you're inefficient. And so we have to learn how to bring that economy up and take less of a withdrawal out of that bank account with each movement that we do, with each rep that we do, with time under tension and things of that sort. Speaking of which, I want to get a little bit nerdy here. When it comes to athletes carry way too much tension to begin with, right? There's a lot of tension, a lot of death gripping the barbell, bracing for too long, right? We tell people to brace when they get ready to lift, but sometimes they hang on to that brace a little bit too long, holding on to your breath for too long between reps, right? Some people, I've known athletes, I've done this myself, where I've done 3 reps in a row and forgot to take a breath. And that does not help when it comes to the movement economy that you're supposed to have, right? And that you're meant to have, and you kind of do have in you. You just haven't learned how to become more efficient. And it's kind of the difference between someone that's almost RX and is RX. RX athletes aren't stronger per se, and it's not because that they can hang on longer. It's because they know when to let go, and that's kind of a very important skill to kind of learn, when to let go. They breathe earlier, they break earlier than they need to, and they reattack a lot cleaner, right? They feel more efficient. They don't take it to the point that they're redlining. They know exactly precisely when they need to stop to give themselves that moment, but keep moving efficiently as they work their way through. It's not a mental toughness thing. It's just a skill that you have to practice and learn, and we just have to get there. So when you get back to the topic of RX readiness, it isn't necessarily about hitting the number. It's not necessarily about hitting the weight that's written up on the board or programmed for you as a prescribed weight. You have to kind of go into it with asking yourself some questions. It's about asking, can I cycle this weight consistently? Can I maintain mechanics under fatigue with this weight? Can I breathe without panicking, which is always a very important one? And then what are the smart breaks that I can take before I reach failure? Now, if at any point during any of those questions you answer no, the fix isn't just to like, oh no, that just means I have to send it harder. And that's not the case here. The fix is to build density, efficiency, and control. That's how RX becomes sustainable. You have to kind of break it down on which question that you just asked yourself, which one is the one that I need the most work in. And this is something that we can take to your coaches and have that conversation with them. Like, how do I become more efficient? How do I breathe without panicking? How do I take smart breaks? What is the definition of a smart break, right? How do I know? What should I be feeling? Things of that sort. Because if we don't ask those questions, this is where people start to stall out. You force the weight too early because, oh, I've hit it a couple times, singles here and there, and, I think I'm ready to go. And then suddenly you find yourself redlining in every workout that involves that weight. Train every day like it's a test, which you shouldn't be doing to begin with. And you avoid backing off to build for quality, right? Once we get a weight, we're usually, okay, now I just need to do more reps at that. But sometimes it's quality over quantity. You need to be as efficient, especially when it comes to fatigue. The faster you go, your technique starts to decline a lot. And so we need to have the conversation of how much technique are we willing to downgrade just a little bit in order to get a bit quicker on a workout. Whereas if I sacrifice a little bit too much, then I have the possibility of injuring myself because I was trying to go too fast. So there's a fine balance there. And again, this is something that I would discuss with your coach. If you don't have one, I would be more than happy to, if you want to comment down below if you have something that you're working on. But the conversation needs to be had of how much is too much in terms of letting your technique kind of start to alter itself. We don't want to lose too much in terms of technique just for the sake of speed. And so it's kind of like that fine balance. As one gets faster, their technique starts to degrade a little bit more. So then we have to sustain that speed and suddenly get our technique to slowly come up and reach back up to a point where it's efficient even at that speed. Cool. Once I get to about 90-95%, all right, cool, I'm very efficient. Now I can speed up a little bit faster. Oh, my technique is starting to downgrade a little bit more, and that's the game we have to play. And it should feel like progress. It shouldn't feel like you're just trying to survive workouts for the sake of surviving them. And this kind of circles back to why I'm doing this channel and why I'm doing these videos. Because that gap between almost hitting RX and consistently performing at an RX or prescribed level isn't necessarily about being brave. It's about readiness. And what does it mean to be ready? And it's built deliberately. It's not built accidentally. You have to be very efficient on the things that you do, and you need to ask questions of your coaches when it comes to things like this, because we can only feel so much. Just because something feels comfortable doesn't necessarily mean it's correct, especially when it comes to form and technique on heavier lifts and things of that sort, because heavier weights pull us out of position and they tend to fight us. So we need to find that balance of, okay, can I maintain position? And if I can't, why can't I? And what can I work on to improve my positioning in those pieces? So as promised, in kind of weeks to come, we're going to get into the skills, kind of moving away from the weights and now talking about those higher level skills a little bit later. We're also going to look at kind of specifically why RX athlete looks calm, whereas an intermediate athlete sometimes looks panicked during a workout. There's some psychology there. There's some things that we can kind of discuss there and discuss how pacing decisions matter more than strength in almost every workout. And I mean, if RX feels close but inconsistent, please subscribe. We are closing the gap the smart way, and I'll see you next time.